The distant whistle of the approaching train echoed through the empty platform of Clearwater Station, Colorado Territory. 1872. As Katherine Valenti clutched her letter of promise tightly between trembling fingers. She had traveled over 1,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met, leaving behind everything familiar in Boston for the promise of a new life in the West. The locomotive's brakes squealed against iron rails as it slowed to a stop, belching clouds of black smoke into the crisp autumn air. Katherine gathered her skirts and stepped carefully onto the weathered wooden platform, her heart pounding in her chest. According to his letters, Henry Blackburn would be waiting for her, ready to take her to the home they would share as husband and wife. But as passengers disembarked around her and hurried into waiting arms of loved ones, Katherine stood alone. "Last stop, Clearwater," the conductor called, tipping his hat to Katherine as he passed. "Everything all right, miss?" "Yes, thank you," she replied with a confidence she didn't feel. My fiancé should be here shortly." The conductor nodded sympathetically. "We'll unload your trunk, miss. You can wait in the depot if you like. It's warmer inside." Katherine nodded gratefully and made her way to the small wooden building that served as Clearwater's train station. Through the window, she watched as her trunk containing everything she owned in the world was unloaded onto the platform. Minutes stretched into an hour. The platform gradually emptied. The train departed with a mournful whistle. Still, no Henry Blackburn. As the sun began its descent behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the platform, Katherine fought back tears. The station agent looked at her with increasing concern as he prepared to close for the day. "I'm sorry, miss," he said finally, hat in hand. "But I need to lock up soon. Is there someone I can fetch for you?" Katherine opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. What could she say? That she'd traveled across the country to marry a man who apparently didn't want her after all. That she had nowhere to go and no one to turn to in this strange, wild place. The creak of boots on the wooden platform caught her attention. A tall figure approached, silhouetted against the setting sun. As he came closer, Katherine could make out the features of a man in his late 20s, trail-worn and sun-bronzed. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, assessed her situation in one quick glance. "You waiting for someone, madam?" he asked, his voice deep and resonant. "I was supposed to meet my fiancé," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Henry Blackburn, do you know him by chance?" A shadow passed over the stranger's face. "I'm afraid I do," he said carefully. "And I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but Henry Blackburn died 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia took him fast." The world seemed to tilt beneath Katherine's feet. "No," she whispered. "That can't be. He sent for me. I have his letters." She fumbled in her reticule for the proof, but the stranger gently shook his head. "I'm mighty sorry, madam. The news wouldn't have had time to reach you." He glanced at her trunk sitting forlornly on the platform. "You have nowhere to go, then?" Katherine shook her head, unable to speak through the lump in her throat. Everything she had planned, every hope for her future, crumbled around her. The stranger was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked toward her trunk. With one fluid motion, he hoisted it onto his broad shoulder as if it weighed nothing at all. "You're not alone," he said simply, extending his free hand toward her. "My name's Noah Forrester. I own a ranch outside of town. My housekeeper, Mrs. Holloway, is a good woman who could use some company. You're welcome to stay until you decide what you want to do next." Katherine stared at his outstretched hand, then at his face, honest, steady, and kind beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. "I don't know you, Mr. Forrester," she said hesitantly. A small smile lifted the corner of his mouth. "No, madam, you don't. But Clearwater's a small town with good people. We look out for strangers in need." He glanced at the darkening sky. "And it'll be dark soon. I can take you to the hotel if you prefer, but it's not much and you'd be alone." Katherine weighed her options quickly. She had limited funds meant to tide her over until her wedding. A hotel would quickly deplete what little she had. And the alternative was, what? To sleep on the platform. "Thank you, Mr. Forrester," she said finally, taking his offered hand. "I accept your kindness." His hand was warm and calloused, enveloping hers completely. For the first time since the train had arrived to an empty platform, Katherine felt something other than despair, a tiny flicker of hope that perhaps all was not lost. "My wagon's this way," Noah said, still carrying her trunk effortlessly. "It's about an hour's ride to my ranch, if that's all right with you." Katherine followed him, acutely aware that she was placing her trust in a complete stranger. But something in Noah Forrester's direct gaze and straightforward manner reassured her. In a world that had just turned upside down, he seemed solid ground. The wagon was simple but well-maintained, pulled by two sturdy horses that nickered softly as Noah approached. He secured her trunk in the back, then offered his hand again to help her onto the seat. "I'm sorry about your fiancé," he said as they pulled away from the station. "Did you know him well?" Katherine smoothed her skirts, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. "Not really," she admitted. "We corresponded for 6 months after he placed an advertisement for a bride in a Boston newspaper. He wrote beautiful letters about his home here, about the life we would build together." She bit her lip, embarrassed now by how easily she had been won over by words on paper. "It sounds foolish now." Noah shook his head. "Not foolish, brave. Takes courage to leave everything you know behind for a chance at something better." "Did you know him?" Katherine asked, curious about the man she had planned to marry. Noah kept his eyes on the road. "We weren't close, but yes. He came to town about 2 years ago, bought the mercantile. Seemed to do well enough, kept to himself mostly." He glanced at her. "I'm sorry if that's not much comfort." Katherine nodded, unsure what comfort she expected. She'd been prepared to marry a stranger. Now she mourned a stranger instead. They rode in companionable silence as the wagon left the small town behind, following a winding road that led into rolling grasslands dotted with stands of aspen and pine. In the distance, purple mountains rose majestically against the darkening sky. Despite her circumstances, Katherine couldn't help but be awed by the wild beauty surrounding her. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Noah nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. "That it is. Different from Boston, I imagine. Very different," she agreed. "Everything feels bigger here." "It grows on you," he said. "The open spaces, the quiet, even the winters, harsh as they can be." As they traveled, Noah pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area, the creek where the best fishing could be had, the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in spectacular profusion each spring, the ridge where a mountain lion had once stalked his cattle. His deep voice was soothing, and Katherine found herself relaxing despite her uncertain future. The Forrester ranch came into view just as the last light faded from the sky. It was larger than Katherine had expected, a sturdy 2-story house built of logs and stone, with a broad porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, and a corral held horses that raised their heads curiously as the wagon approached. Light spilled from the windows and smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. As Noah drew the wagon to a halt, the front door opened and a plump, gray-haired woman appeared on the porch. "Is that you, Noah? You're late for supper and it's getting cold." She called out, then stopped abruptly when she spotted Katherine. "Oh, you've brought company." Noah jumped down from the wagon and helped Katherine descend. "Mrs. Holloway, This is Miss Katherine Valenti. She arrived on today's train expecting to meet Henry Blackburn." Understanding immediately dawned on the older woman's face. "Oh, you poor dear. Come in. Come in right away." She hurried down the steps and took Catherine's arm. "You must be exhausted and half-starved after such a journey." Catherine found herself ushered into a warm kitchen fragrant with the smell of roast chicken and fresh bread. Mrs. Holloway settled her at a table by the fire and bustled about, assembling a plate of food while Noah brought in her trunk. "I'll put this in the guest room upstairs," he said, then disappeared with her belongings. "Now then," Mrs. Holloway said, setting a steaming plate before Catherine. "You eat while I make up the bed properly. The guest room hasn't been used in a while, but it's clean enough." Overwhelmed by their kindness, Catherine felt tears threatening again. "I don't know how to thank you both," she said softly. The older woman patted her shoulder. "There's no need for thanks, my dear. The West can be harsh, but we look after our own here. And anyone who walks through that door is one of our own." She smiled warmly. "Now eat up. Everything looks better after a good meal." Catherine obediently began to eat, realizing suddenly how hungry she was. The food was simple but delicious, and by the time Noah returned to the kitchen, she had finished everything on her plate. "Feeling better?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. "Much, thank you," she replied. "But I should clarify something. I can't stay here long. I have some savings, but not enough to—" Noah raised a hand, cutting off her concerns. "Let's not worry about that tonight. You've had a shock and you need rest. Tomorrow's soon enough to make plans." Catherine wanted to protest, to insist that she couldn't accept such open-ended charity, but exhaustion was settling over her like a heavy blanket. Her eyelids drooped, and she stifled a yawn behind her hand. "Mrs. Holloway will show you to your room," Noah said, standing. "I have some work to finish in the barn, but I'll see you in the morning, Miss Valenti." "Catherine," she corrected softly. "If I'm to stay in your home, please call me Catherine." A small smile touched his lips. "Catherine," he agreed. "Sleep well." The bedroom was simple but comfortable, with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt, a wooden chest of drawers, and a small desk beneath the window. Mrs. Holloway had thoughtfully unpacked her nightgown and laid it out, and a pitcher of fresh water waited on the washstand. "If you need anything in the night, my room is just down the hall," the housekeeper said. "And don't you fret about a thing. The Lord closes doors and opens windows, my mother always said." Left alone, Catherine changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of the day's events. That morning, she had been filled with nervous anticipation about meeting her future husband. Now, she was a guest in a stranger's home, her plans in tatters. What would she do? Return to Boston. She had nothing there, no family since her parents died, no home since she'd given up her position as a governess to travel west, stay in Clearwater, and do what? She had skills, she was educated, could read and write well, played the piano passably, but she had no idea if such accomplishments had any value in a frontier town. Too tired to worry further, Catherine slipped beneath the quilt and was asleep almost as soon as her head touched the pillow. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the distant sound of activity outside. For a moment she was disoriented, then the memories of the previous day came flooding back. Henry was dead. She was alone in a strange place, but not entirely alone, she reminded herself. After washing and dressing in one of her simpler dresses, a blue cotton that had seen better days but was suitable for morning wear, Catherine made her way downstairs. The house was quiet, but the aroma of coffee and bacon led her to the kitchen where Mrs. Holloway was at work. "Good morning, dear." "Did you sleep well?" The older woman beamed at her. "Very well, thank you," Catherine replied. "Can I help with anything? You can pour yourself some coffee and sit right down. Breakfast is nearly ready." Mrs. Holloway nodded toward the stove where biscuits were browning. "Noah's been up since dawn, checking on a new foal. He'll be in shortly." As if summoned by his name, the door opened, and Noah entered, bringing with him the scent of fresh air and horses. He'd clearly been working. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing muscular forearms, and his dark hair was tousled. "Morning," he said, his blue eyes finding Katherine immediately. "You look rested." "I am, thank you," she replied, suddenly self-conscious under his direct gaze. He smiled briefly, then turned to wash his hands at the pump by the sink. "The foal's doing fine, Mrs. Holloway. Mare too." "That's good news. Now sit down, both of you, before the biscuits get cold." Breakfast was a simple but hearty affair: eggs, bacon, biscuits drizzled with honey, and strong coffee. Katherine was surprised by how comfortable she felt in their company. Mrs. Holloway chattered about local news and her plans for the day, while Noah ate quietly, occasionally adding a comment or asking a question. "What about you, Miss Katherine?" Mrs. Holloway asked eventually. "What sort of things do you enjoy doing?" Katherine set down her coffee cup. "I was a governess in Boston, so I spent most of my time teaching children. But I enjoy reading, and I like to sew and play the piano when I have the chance." Noah looked up with interest. "A governess? So you're educated?" Katherine nodded. "I attended the Boston Female Seminary until my parents died. After that, I had to support myself." A thoughtful expression crossed his face. "Clearwater School is without a teacher at the moment. The last one, Miss Perkins, married a miner and moved to California 2 months ago." Katherine's heart quickened. "Are you suggesting—" "Just thinking aloud," Noah said. "The town council's been trying to find someone qualified. Most folks around here can't afford to send their children back east for schooling, and not everyone has time to teach them at home, especially during the busy seasons." "It's a fine idea," Mrs. Holloway declared. "You should speak to Mayor Wilson about it today when you go into town." Noah raised an eyebrow. "I'm going into town." "You are now," the housekeeper said firmly. "We need flour and sugar, and you need to introduce Miss Katherine to the mayor. And while you're there, you should let Reverend Green know that Henry's intended has arrived, so he can inform the congregation. People will want to pay their respects." Katherine felt a pang at the mention of Henry. In the comfort of the Forrester home, she'd almost forgotten the reason for her journey. "I should visit his grave," she said softly, "to say goodbye properly." Noah nodded, his expression gentle. "We can do that. He's buried in the town cemetery not far from the church." He pushed back from the table. "I'll hitch up the wagon after I finish with the morning chores. We can head to town around midday if that suits you." "That would be fine. Thank you." Katherine began gathering the breakfast dishes. "And please, let me help with the housework while I'm here. I can't accept your hospitality without contributing something." Mrs. Holloway looked like she wanted to protest, but Noah caught her eye and gave a slight shake of his head. "We'd appreciate the help," he said. "Mrs. Holloway keeps this place running smoothly, but there's always plenty to do." The morning passed quickly. Katherine helped Mrs. Holloway with the washing up, then spent time airing out bedrooms and sweeping floors. The simple, familiar work was soothing, giving her hands something to do while her mind processed her situation. By midday, she had changed into her best dress, a forest green with modest lace trim, and pinned her honey-brown hair into a neat chignon. Her appearance might be all she had to recommend her to the town council, and she wanted to look as professional as possible. Noah was waiting by the wagon when she emerged from the house, and something in his expression as he looked at her made Katherine's cheeks warm. "You look very nice," he said simply, offering his hand to help her up. "Thank you," she replied. I wanted to make a good impression. As they drove toward town, Katherine gathered her courage and asked the question that had been on her mind. "Mr. Forrester Noah, if you don't mind my asking, how do you come to have such a large ranch? You seem quite young to have established so much." He was silent for a moment, and Katherine feared she had overstepped, but when he spoke, his voice was matter of fact. "My father started the ranch when I was just a boy. He came west after the war, the Mexican-American War, not the recent one, with nothing but determination and some knowledge of cattle. Built it up little by little." He glanced at her. "When he and my mother died of influenza 5 years ago, I took over. I was 23 then." "I'm sorry about your parents," Katherine said softly. "I know how difficult that is." Noah nodded. "It was hard, especially since I had my younger sister to look after too. She's in Denver now, married to a banker." A fond smile briefly lit his features. "Ella writes every week, tells me all about city life and her husband's business. She wants me to visit, but—" he shrugged. "The ranch keeps me busy. And Mrs. Holloway, she came with her husband when I was about 10. He was our foreman until he passed on, and she stayed on as housekeeper. She's like family now." He cast her a sidelong glance. "What about your family? You mentioned your parents are gone." Katherine nodded. "They died within a month of each other when I was 19. A fever swept through our neighborhood. I had no siblings, and my only aunt lives in England, so I've been on my own since then." "Is that why you answered Henry's advertisement? To find family?" The question was personal, but his tone held no judgment, only genuine interest. "Partly," she admitted. "And partly because Boston held too many painful memories. Henry's letters painted such a vivid picture of life out here, the freedom, the opportunity to build something new." She sighed. It seemed like a chance to belong somewhere again. Noah was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think you'll find Clearwater welcoming. It's a young town, still finding its way, but the people are good-hearted for the most part." They crested a small hill, and the town came into view below them, a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church with a small steeple, and clusters of homes spreading outward. It wasn't large, but it looked well established and prosperous. "It's larger than I expected," Katherine remarked. "It's grown a lot in the last few years. The railroad brought new folks, and there's talk of a silver mine opening in the mountains to the west. If that happens, Clearwater will grow even more." Noah guided the wagon onto the main street. "The schoolhouse is there," he said, pointing to a white clapboard building set back from the road. "And that's the mercantile that Henry owned." Katherine followed his gesture to a substantial 2-story building with a wide front porch. A sign proclaiming Clearwater Mercantile hung over the entrance. It looked prosperous and well-maintained. A lump formed in her throat at the sight of what might have been her home. "You know what will happen to the store now?" she asked. "His sister's husband is coming from Denver to settle his affairs," Noah replied. "I expect they'll sell it. Henry didn't have any other family that I know of." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of a brick building with Town Hall painted on a sign above the door. "Mayor Wilson's office is inside. Shall we see if he's available?" Mayor Wilson turned out to be a portly, jovial man with a magnificent mustache and an instantly welcoming manner. His small office was cluttered with papers and maps, and he cleared a chair for Katherine with apologetic haste. "Miss Valenti, what a pleasure to meet you, though I'm terribly sorry about the circumstances," he said, pumping her hand enthusiastically. "We were all shocked by Henry's passing. Such a fine young man and so sudden." "Thank you, Mayor Wilson," Katherine replied. "I only knew him through his letters, but he wrote very fondly of Clearwater and its people." The mayor beamed. "Did he now? Well, that's gratifying to hear." He settled behind his desk. Now, how can I help you today? Forrester here mentioned you might be interested in our teaching position. Katherine straightened her shoulders. Yes, sir. I served as a governess in Boston for 3 years, teaching children between the ages of 6 and 12. Before that, I attended the Boston Female Seminary where I studied literature, mathematics, history, and music. Mayor Wilson's eyebrows rose appreciatively. Impressive credentials, Miss Valenti. Most impressive indeed. We've had the school closed for nearly 2 months now and the children are falling behind. Parents are getting restless. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. The position pays $30 a month, with lodging provided there's a small apartment attached to the school. Term runs from September to June, with breaks for harvest and planting seasons when the older children are needed at home. Katherine's heart leapt. The salary was modest, but with lodging included, it would be enough to live on. I would be very interested, sir. Excellent. I'll need to consult with the town council, of course, but I don't foresee any objections. Could you start next Monday? That would give us time to notify the families and prepare the schoolroom. I could, yes, Katherine replied, hardly believing her good fortune. Wonderful. Mayor Wilson stood and shook her hand again. I'll send word to the Forrester Ranch once the council has met. But consider it all but certain, Miss Valenti. Clearwater will be lucky to have a teacher of your caliber. As they left the town hall, Katherine felt almost lightheaded with relief. I can't believe it was that simple, she said to Noah. In Boston, such a position would have required multiple interviews and letters of recommendation. Noah smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. Frontier towns can't afford to be too particular when qualified people present themselves. Besides, the mayor's a good judge of character. Their next stop was the church, a modest wooden structure with a small cemetery behind it. Reverend Green, a tall, thin man with kind eyes, greeted them warmly when Noah explained Katherine's situation. My dear Miss Valenti, what a trial you've endured, he said sympathetically. Please know that our congregation stands ready to support you in any way needed. Thank you, Reverend, Katherine replied. I would like to visit Henry's grave if I may, of course. It's near the back, under the old oak tree. Take all the time you need. Noah walked with her through the small cemetery, past weathered headstones bearing witness to the harsh realities of frontier life: children taken by disease, young men by accidents, women in childbirth. When they reached a fresh grave marked by a simple wooden cross, he stopped. I'll wait by the wagon, he said quietly. Give you some privacy. Katherine nodded gratefully. When she was alone, she stood looking down at the mound of earth that covered the man she had planned to marry. The wooden cross bore his name, dates of birth and death, and the simple epitaph. He sought a new life. Hello, Henry, she said softly. I'm Katherine. I came as you asked, though I'm a bit late. Tears welled in her eyes. I wish I could have known you. Your letters were so kind, so full of hope. She reached out and touched the cross gently. I hope you found peace. She stood in silence for a few minutes more, saying a quiet prayer for the soul of Henry Blackburn. Then, wiping her eyes, she turned and walked back to where Noah waited. He said nothing, just helped her into the wagon with gentle hands. His silent understanding was more comforting than any words could have been. Their final stop was the mercantile, now being operated by Henry's assistant until his brother-in-law arrived. Katherine hesitated outside, suddenly uncertain. We don't have to go in if you'd rather not, Noah said, reading her expression. No, I want to, she said firmly. I should see the place Henry built. The store was well stocked and busy, with customers browsing shelves filled with everything from canned goods to bolts of fabric. A young man behind the counter looked up as they entered, his expression changing to one of surprise when Noah introduced Katherine. "Miss Valenti, I'm Samuel Porter. I worked with Mr. Blackburn for the past year." He shook her hand earnestly. "He was very excited about your arrival, had me order in special tea from Denver because he said ladies from Boston appreciate fine tea." The simple detail that Henry had thought about what might please her brought a fresh wave of grief. "That was very thoughtful of him," she managed to say. Samuel nodded. "He was a good man, fair employer, honest businessman. The whole town was shocked when he took ill so suddenly." As Samuel helped other customers, Katherine wandered through the store, trying to imagine what her life might have been like as Mrs. Henry Blackburn, mistress of this establishment. She could picture herself keeping the books at the desk in the corner, arranging displays of ribbons and buttons, greeting customers with a smile. But it was not to be. "Ready?" Noah asked quietly after she had made a circuit of the store. Katherine nodded, suddenly tired. The emotional weight of the day was catching up to her. They completed Mrs. Holloway's shopping list: flour, sugar, coffee, and a few other staples, then headed back to the ranch. Katherine was quiet during the return journey, processing everything that had happened. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Noah asked eventually. Katherine sighed. "I was just thinking how strange life is. Yesterday morning, I was full of anticipation about meeting my future husband. Now I'm preparing to become Clearwater's schoolteacher." "You regret coming west?" His question was careful, neutral. Katherine considered it seriously. "No," she said finally. "It's not what I expected, but perhaps it's where I'm meant to be." She glanced at him. "Thank you, Noah, for everything. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been at the depot yesterday." His hands tightened slightly on the reins. "I'm glad I was there." That evening, after a simple but satisfying supper, Katherine sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in breathtaking hues of orange and pink. The air was cooling rapidly, but she wasn't ready to go inside just yet. The vast openness of the landscape called to something in her soul, something that had perhaps been stifled in the narrow streets and crowded buildings of Boston. The sound of the door opening behind her drew her attention. Noah stepped out onto the porch, carrying a blanket which he offered to her wordlessly. "Thank you," she said, wrapping it around her shoulders against the evening chill. He sat beside her on the bench, his gaze following hers to the horizon. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "It's the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen," Katherine admitted. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "Mayor Wilson came by the ranch while you were resting this afternoon," Noah said finally. "The council met and unanimously approved your appointment as teacher. You can move into the school apartment this Saturday if you'd like." Katherine turned to him in surprise. That was quick. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Small towns can move fast when they want to. And Clearwater desperately needs a teacher. "I'm grateful," she said, "and a little nervous. It's been a while since I taught in a formal school setting." "You'll do fine," he assured her. "Most of the children are eager to learn, though there are always a few who'd rather be fishing or hunting." Katherine laughed softly. "Some things are the same everywhere, I suppose." Another comfortable silence fell between them. Katherine found herself studying Noah's profile in the fading light, the strong line of his jaw, the slight curl of dark hair at his collar, the thoughtful set of his mouth. There was a solidness to him, a reliability that she found deeply reassuring in a world that had recently proved so unpredictable. "Will you be all right? Living alone at the school, I mean," he asked suddenly. The question surprised her. "I lived alone in Boston," she pointed out. "Well, I had a room in a boarding house, but it amounts to the same thing." Noah nodded. "It's different here, wilder, but the school is in town and there are neighbors close by." He hesitated, then added, "And I'm only an hour's ride away if you ever need anything." The simple offer touched Katherine deeply. "Thank you, Noah." Later, lying in bed, Katherine reflected on how drastically her life had changed in just 2 days. The grief of Henry's death was still there, but it was an abstract sort of grief mourning what might have been rather than what was. Her more immediate feelings were gratitude for the kindness she'd been shown, and a growing excitement about her new position. And beneath it all, a small, quiet awareness of Noah Forrester, his steady presence, his thoughtful gestures, the unexpected warmth in his blue eyes when he smiled. It was too soon for such thoughts, she told herself firmly. Much too soon. And yet, the next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Holloway helped Katherine mend and press her limited wardrobe to ensure she would look presentable for her first day of teaching. Noah took her into town again to show her the schoolhouse and introduce her to several families whose children would be her students. The school was a simple one-room building with rows of desks facing a larger desk and blackboard at the front. Large windows let in plenty of light, and a pot-bellied stove stood ready for winter heating. Behind the schoolhouse was a small attached apartment consisting of a sitting room, bedroom, and tiny kitchen. The furnishings were basic but adequate: a bed, a table with chairs, a small sofa, and a bookshelf with a few well-worn volumes. "It's perfect," Katherine declared, turning to Noah with a smile. "Simple, but it has everything I need." A peculiar expression crossed his face. "You're easy to please," he observed. "Life has taught me to appreciate what I have rather than yearn for what I don't," she replied. His blue eyes held hers for a long moment. "That's a rare quality." Saturday came all too quickly. Noah loaded Katherine's trunk into his wagon once more, and Mrs. Holloway packed a basket of food to tide you over until you can properly stock your kitchen. "You come out to the ranch for Sunday dinner whenever you can," the housekeeper insisted, enveloping Katherine in a warm hug. "It's too quiet with just Noah and me." "I will," Katherine promised, surprised by how attached she had grown to the older woman in such a short time. The ride to town was quiet, both of them aware that a chapter was closing. At the schoolhouse, Noah carried her trunk inside and set it carefully in the bedroom. "I think that's everything," he said, standing somewhat awkwardly in the small sitting room. "Mayor Wilson said he'd stop by this afternoon to make sure you're settling in all right. And Mrs. Turner from the boarding house across the street promised to check on you too." "Everyone has been so kind," Katherine said. "I feel quite overwhelmed by it." Noah shifted his weight, hat in hand. "Will you be at church tomorrow?" "Yes, of course. Reverend Green was kind enough to invite me to sit with his family." "Good. That's good." Noah seemed uncharacteristically unsure of himself. "Well, I should let you get settled." Katherine walked with him to the door. "Thank you again, Noah. I don't know how I can ever repay your kindness." He looked down at her, his expression serious. "There's nothing to repay." Anyone would have done the same. But they both knew that wasn't true. Noah Forrester had gone far beyond what might be expected of a stranger, and they both knew it. "Still," Katherine said softly, "thank you." After a moment's hesitation, Noah reached out and briefly touched her hand. "You're welcome, Katherine. I'll see you at church tomorrow." The rest of the day passed in a flurry of unpacking and organizing. Mayor Wilson did indeed stop by, bringing his wife, who presented Katherine with a small potted geranium for her windowsill. Mrs. Turner appeared with fresh baked bread and helpful advice about which local merchants offered the best prices. By evening, Katherine felt like she'd met half the town. Alone at last, she sat at her small table and wrote out lesson plans for her first week of teaching. The work was familiar and satisfying. helping to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach when she thought about facing a classroom full of strangers on Monday morning. Sunday dawned clear and cool, a perfect autumn day. Katherine dressed in her best dress, the green one that Noah had complimented, and walked to the church, where Reverend Green introduced her to the congregation as our providential new teacher, Miss Valenti. After the service, she found herself surrounded by parents eager to meet their children's new teacher. They were friendly and welcoming, clearly relieved that the school would be reopening. Katherine did her best to remember names and match them to the children who hung back, eyeing her with varying degrees of curiosity and wariness. Throughout it all, she was aware of Noah's presence at the edge of the churchyard, talking with other ranchers but occasionally glancing her way. When the crowd around her finally thinned, he approached, hat in hand. "You've made quite an impression," he observed. "I haven't seen Mrs. Abernathy that animated since the last church social." Katherine laughed. "Everyone's been very welcoming. Will you join us for dinner at the ranch?" he asked. "Mrs. Holloway sent me with strict instructions not to take no for an answer." The invitation was tempting, but Katherine shook her head reluctantly. "I need to finish preparing for tomorrow. Perhaps next Sunday." Was it her imagination, or did disappointment flicker across his face? "Of course. Next Sunday, then." He hesitated, then added, "Good luck tomorrow. The children are lucky to have you." The warmth in his voice stayed with Katherine as she walked back to her new home, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Katherine dressed carefully in a simple but neat blue dress, pinned her hair in a practical style that would stay tidy throughout the day, and walked to the schoolhouse early to make sure everything was ready. At 8 o'clock, she rang the bell that hung outside the door, its clear tone echoing through the crisp morning air. Within minutes, children began arriving, some running eagerly, others dragging their feet, a few clinging shyly to their mother's hands. By 8:30, 23 students ranging in age from 6 to 16 were seated at the desks, watching her with expressions that ranged from open curiosity to veiled skepticism. Katherine took a deep breath and smiled. "Good morning. I'm Miss Valenti, and I'm very pleased to be your new teacher." The first day was challenging but rewarding. The younger children were eager to please, while the older ones, especially the boys, needed more convincing that school was worth their time. But by the end of the day, Katherine felt she had made progress. Even reluctant Tommy Jenkins had shown interest when she demonstrated a mathematical problem using examples from cattle ranching. As the weeks passed, Katherine settled into a comfortable routine. Weekdays were filled with teaching, evenings with grading and preparation, and Saturdays with household tasks and shopping. Sundays meant church and, increasingly often, dinner at the Forrester ranch. Those Sunday visits became the highlight of her week. Mrs. Holloway always prepared special meals, and afterward they would sit in the parlor where Katherine would sometimes play the old piano while Noah listened, a look of contentment on his normally serious face. Occasionally, if the weather was fine, Noah would suggest a ride to show her more of the ranch and the surrounding countryside. On horseback, he seemed even more at home, guiding his mount with subtle movements and pointing out features of the landscape with obvious pride. During these rides, Katherine learned more about him, how he had expanded the ranch's operations, experimenting with new breeding techniques, how he employed several local men, including 2 former slaves who had headed west after the Civil War seeking opportunity, how he read voraciously during the winter months when ranch work slowed, favoring history and natural science. In turn, she shared stories of her life in Boston, her parents who had encouraged her education despite limited means, her dreams of someday traveling to Europe to see the great museums and cathedrals she had only read about. As October gave way to November, Katherine realized with a start that she had now been in Clearwater for nearly 2 months. The initial strangeness had faded, replaced by a growing sense of belonging. Her students were progressing well, and parents regularly stopped her on the street to express their appreciation. She had formed friendships with several local women, particularly Judith Turner, whose boarding house stood across from the school, and Sarah Green, the Reverend's kind-hearted wife. And then there was Noah. Their friendship had deepened with each passing week, growing into something Katherine valued deeply. She found herself looking forward to their conversations, to the quiet understanding that seemed to flow between them, to the rare but transformative smile that would light his features when something pleased him. It was during the first heavy snowfall of the season that Katherine acknowledged to herself that her feelings for Noah had become more than friendly. She had been caught in town when the storm hit suddenly, turning what had been a clear November afternoon into a swirling white nightmare. Visibility dropped to mere feet, and the temperature plummeted. Katherine had taken shelter in the Mercantile, now being run by Henry's brother-in-law, Mr. Peterson, and his wife. "You can't possibly walk back to the school in this," Mrs. Peterson insisted. "You must stay with us until it passes." But as darkness fell and the storm showed no signs of abating, there was a commotion at the door. Noah stamped in, covered in snow, his face red from the cold. "Katherine," he said, spotting her immediately, "thank God, I've been checking all the buildings in town." "Noah, what are you doing out in this weather?" she exclaimed. "Looking for you," he said simply. "Mrs. Turner came to the ranch when you didn't return to the school. She was worried." The knowledge that he had ridden through a blizzard to find her made Katherine's heart twist with emotion. "You shouldn't have risked it," she scolded, even as warmth spread through her. "I brought the sleigh," he said, ignoring her protest. "It's safer than walking in this. I can take you back to the school if you'd like, or," he hesitated, "or you could come to the ranch. The roads will likely be impassable tomorrow, and Mrs. Holloway would welcome the company." The prospect of being snowbound at the ranch with Noah was far too appealing. "I should get back to the school," Katherine said reluctantly. "I have everything I need there, and I wouldn't want to impose." Something like disappointment flickered in Noah's eyes, but he nodded. "Of course. Let me take you home then." The sleigh ride through the swirling snow was both frightening and exhilarating. Noah's strong hands guided the horses confidently, and he had wrapped Katherine in heavy blankets before they set out. Despite the storm raging around them, she felt strangely peaceful, cocooned in warmth with Noah beside her. When they reached the school, he insisted on seeing her safely inside and lighting the stove before he would leave. "You're sure you'll be all right?" he asked, standing at the door, reluctant to go. "I'll be fine," she assured him. "But what about you? Can you make it back to the ranch in this?" "Don't worry about me," he said with a small smile. "I've navigated worse storms than this." Still, he hesitated. "Katherine," he began, then stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. "Take care of yourself." After he left, Katherine stood at the window, watching the sleigh disappear into the swirling white, her heart full of emotions she wasn't ready to name. The blizzard lasted 3 days, effectively closing the school. When it finally cleared, leaving pristine white drifts taller than a man in some places, Katherine opened the schoolhouse to find several of her older students already there with shovels, clearing paths under Noah's direction. "Noah." "What a surprise," she called, wrapping her shawl more tightly around her shoulders against the biting cold. He turned at the sound of her voice, and the smile that lit his face sent warmth coursing through her despite the frigid air. "Good morning," he said, walking toward her. I thought you might need some help digging out, and these boys were eager to earn some extra credit." He winked at the students, who grinned back. "That's very thoughtful," Katherine said. "Would you all like to come in for hot chocolate when you're finished? I was just about to make some." The boys cheered, and Noah's smile widened. "That sounds perfect." Later, watching him sitting comfortably at one of the student desks, big hands wrapped around a mug of chocolate as he listened to Tommy Jenkins explain a tricky math problem, Katherine felt a surge of affection so strong it nearly took her breath away. It was more than attraction, more than friendship. Somewhere along the way, without her even realizing it, she had fallen in love with Noah Forrester. The realization should have frightened her. After all, she had come to Clearwater to marry another man. But instead, it filled her with a quiet certainty. Whatever happened, whether Noah returned her feelings or not, she was where she was meant to be. As November gave way to December, Clearwater began preparing for Christmas. The town's annual Christmas social was the highlight of the winter season, and Katherine found herself on the planning committee alongside Mrs. Green, Mrs. Turner, and several other local women. "We always hold it at the town hall," Mrs. Green explained during their first meeting. "Everyone brings food to share, and there's music and dancing. The children perform a small pageant. Perhaps you could help organize that, Miss Valenti." Katherine agreed readily, and soon her evenings were filled with rehearsals as her students prepared to present a series of Christmas tableaux and carols. The excitement of the children was infectious, and Katherine found herself caught up in the holiday spirit, despite being far from the traditions she had known in Boston. A week before Christmas, Noah appeared at the schoolhouse just as Katherine was dismissing her students for the day. "I have something to show you," he said, his eyes alight with unusual animation. "Can you come with me, just for an hour or so?" Intrigued, Katherine agreed. Outside, his sleigh waited, the horses stamping impatiently in the snow. Noah helped her in, tucking blankets around her with careful attention before taking his place beside her. "Where are we going?" she asked as they glided away from town. "You'll see," was his only answer, a mysterious half-smile playing at his lips. They didn't head toward the ranch, but instead took a different road that wound through a forest of pine trees. The late afternoon sun slanted through the branches, casting long blue shadows across the pristine snow. After about 20 minutes, Noah drew the horses to a halt in a small clearing. "Come with me," he said, helping her from the sleigh. Taking her hand, he led her along a narrow path through the trees. Katherine followed, curious and slightly breathless from the warmth of his hand around hers. The path opened suddenly into another clearing, and Katherine gasped. Before them stood a perfect Christmas tree, a blue spruce about 7 feet tall, its branches ideally shaped and dusted with snow. "I thought we could cut it for the schoolhouse," Noah said, watching her face. "For your students' Christmas pageant." The thoughtfulness of the gesture moved Katherine deeply. "It's perfect," she said, her voice soft with emotion. "How did you find it?" "I've been looking for a while," he admitted. "Wanted it to be special." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something warm and full of promise. For a moment, Katherine thought he might kiss her. But instead, he squeezed her hand gently, then released it to retrieve the axe from the sleigh. With efficient strokes, he felled the tree, then secured it to the sleigh for transport back to town. The return journey was filled with comfortable conversation about Christmas traditions and memories, both of them carefully avoiding any mention of the moment of connection they had shared in the clearing. At the schoolhouse, Noah carried the tree inside and helped Katherine set it up by the window where all her students would be able to see it the next day. "Thank you," she said as they stood admiring their handiwork. "This will make the pageant even more special." Noah looked down at her, his expression serious. "I'm glad you like it." He hesitated, then added, "Katherine, I wanted to ask, would you allow me to escort you to the Christmas social next week?" Her heart leapt at the invitation. "I would like that very much," she said simply. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features. "Good, that's good." The night of the social arrived cold and clear, with stars glittering like diamonds in the dark sky. Katherine dressed with special care in her best dress, a deep burgundy that Mrs. Holloway had helped her alter to match the current fashion, and arranged her hair in an elegant style she hadn't attempted since leaving Boston. When a knock came at her door, she opened it to find Noah standing there, looking handsome and somewhat uncomfortable in a suit rather than his usual work clothes. He held a small paper-wrapped package in his hands. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice low and sincere. Katherine felt a blush warm her cheeks. "Thank you, you look very handsome yourself." He smiled briefly, then held out the package. "I brought you something, for Christmas, though it's a bit early." Touched, Katherine took the gift and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a pair of soft leather gloves, finely made and lined with rabbit fur. "They're beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the buttery leather. "Your hands were red with cold after playground duty last week," Noah explained. "I thought these might help." The fact that he had noticed, had thought about her comfort, meant more to Katherine than the gift itself. "Thank you," she said softly. "I have something for you too, but it's under the tree for Christmas Day." His smile widened. "Something to look forward to." The town hall was transformed for the occasion, with evergreen boughs and red ribbons decorating the walls and tables laden with food along one side. A small band of local musicians played lively tunes, and the center of the floor had been cleared for dancing. Katherine's students performed their pageant to enthusiastic applause, then joined their families for the feast that followed. Throughout the evening, Katherine was aware of Noah's steady presence beside her, introducing her to ranchers who lived too far out to visit town regularly, making sure her plate and cup were filled, his hand occasionally resting lightly at the small of her back as they moved through the crowded room. When the band struck up a waltz, Noah turned to her with an questioning look. "Would you care to dance, Miss Valenti?" "I would be delighted, Mr. Forrester," she replied with a smile. He led her onto the dance floor and took her into his arms with surprising grace for a man who spent most of his days on horseback. As they moved together to the music, Katherine felt as though they were in perfect harmony, anticipating each other's movements as naturally as breathing. "I didn't know you could dance so well," she remarked, looking up at him. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "My mother insisted I learn, said no son of hers would stumble around a dance floor like a newborn colt." Katherine laughed softly. "I wish I could have met her. She sounds remarkable." "She would have liked you," Noah said, his voice warm. "She valued education highly, taught me and my sister herself until the town was big enough for a proper school." As the music played on, they continued to dance, their conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Katherine couldn't remember when she had last felt so completely happy, so perfectly in tune with another person. Later, as Noah drove her home in his sleigh under a canopy of stars, a comfortable silence fell between them. When they reached her door, he helped her down and walked her to the entrance of her small apartment. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," Katherine said, reluctant for the night to end. Noah looked down at her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Katherine," he began, then paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I've been wanting to tell you something for a while now." Her heart quickened. "Yes," he took a deep breath. "When I found you at the depot that day, I had no idea how much you would come to mean to me. These past months, getting to know you, they've been the happiest I can remember." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. Noah, I know it might seem soon, he continued, and if you think me too forward, I'll understand. But I can't keep pretending that my feelings for you are merely friendly. His blue eyes searched hers. I've fallen in love with you, Katherine. Joy surged through her, bright and overwhelming. Oh, Noah, she whispered, I've fallen in love with you too. For a moment, he simply stared at her, as if not quite believing what he'd heard. Then slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he leaned down and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, warm and tender, his hand coming up to cradle her face as if she were something infinitely precious. When they finally parted, Noah rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if savoring the moment. I never expected this, he murmured. When Henry's letter came, asking me to meet his bride at the depot because he was too ill to go himself, I had no idea. Katherine pulled back slightly, confused. Henry asked you to meet me. Noah opened his eyes, looking equally confused. Yes, didn't I tell you? He sent a message to the ranch the day before he died, asking if I would meet the train and explain things to his bride if he wasn't well enough to come himself. I agreed, of course, though I had no idea he was so near the end. Katherine shook her head slowly. No, you never mentioned that. I'm sorry, Noah said, looking troubled. I should have told you. It just didn't seem important after everything else. It's not important, Katherine assured him, reaching up to touch his face gently. Except that it means I have one more thing to thank Henry for. If not for his request, we might never have met. Noah's expression softened, and he caught her hand in his, pressing a kiss to her palm. A twist of fate I'll be forever grateful for. The days leading up to Christmas passed in a golden haze for Katherine. Her students were excited about the holiday, their energy infectious. The tree Noah had cut for the schoolhouse stood beautifully decorated with paper chains and stars the children had made, and each day ended with Christmas carols sung around it. In the evenings, Noah often came to call, sometimes bringing Mrs. Holloway along, other times coming alone. They would sit by the fire in Katherine's small sitting room, talking about their days, making plans for the holiday, or sometimes just enjoying the comfortable silence that can exist between two people who understand each other deeply. On Christmas Eve, after church services where the congregation sang carols by candlelight, Noah took Katherine back to the ranch for dinner with Mrs. Holloway. The house was festively decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, and the smell of roast goose and spiced cider filled the air. After dinner, they exchanged gifts by the fire in the parlor. Katherine gave Mrs. Holloway a hand-embroidered handkerchief and Noah a leather-bound copy of Thoreau's Walden that she had ordered specially from Denver. How did you know? He asked in wonder, running his fingers over the embossed cover. Katherine smiled. You mentioned once that you had borrowed it from Reverend Green and enjoyed it. I thought you should have your own copy. His gift to her was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. Open it, he urged. Inside was a tiny pressed flower, a columbine, Colorado's state flower. It reminded me of you, Noah said softly. Beautiful and strong enough to thrive in harsh conditions. Katherine was too moved to speak. She simply held out the locket to him and turned so he could fasten it around her neck. When she faced him again, his expression was so full of love that it took her breath away. Mrs. Holloway, watching them with a knowing smile, tactfully excused herself to prepare coffee, leaving them alone. Katherine, Noah said, taking her hands in his. These past months have been the happiest of my life. I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything. He took a deep breath. I love you. Will you marry me? Joy filled Katherine, bright and overwhelming. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Noah, I will marry you. His smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, a kiss full of promise and love and dreams for their future together. Mrs. Holloway returned to find them still embracing and gave a delighted cry when they shared their news. "I knew it. I've known since the day Noah brought you home, all wet and worried for a woman he'd just met. I told myself, Emma Holloway, that boys finally met his match." She wiped happy tears from her eyes. "Oh, this is the best Christmas gift an old woman could ask for." They were married on New Year's Day, 1873, in Clearwater's church with Reverend Green officiating. The entire town turned out for the celebration, filling the small church to capacity. Katherine wore a simple dress of ivory silk that Sarah Green had helped her make with Mrs. Holloway's lace veil and the silver locket Noah had given her. Noah, standing tall and handsome at the altar, watched her walk toward him with such love in his eyes that Katherine felt her heart might burst with happiness. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through all of life's joys and sorrows, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home. The reception was held at the town hall, transformed once again, with decorations and tables laden with food contributed by what seemed like every household in Clearwater. There was dancing and laughter, toasts and well wishes, and throughout it all, Noah kept Katherine close, his hand often finding hers as if he couldn't bear to be disconnected from her even for a moment. As the celebration continued into the evening, Noah leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Forrester." The sound of her new name sent a thrill through Katherine. "Yes," she whispered back. "Let's go home." They slipped away amid cheers and good-natured teasing, climbing into Noah's sleigh now decorated with ribbons and bells courtesy of Katherine's students. As they drove away from town toward the ranch, their home now snow began to fall softly, large flakes drifting lazily in the glow of the lantern hanging from the sleigh. "Happy?" Noah asked, his arm secure around her waist. Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment filling her. "Completely," she said. "And you?" He pressed a kiss to her temple. "More than I ever thought possible." Spring came early to Colorado that year, bringing new growth and new beginnings. Katherine continued teaching, having decided with Noah's full support that she would finish the school term. The children had thrived under her guidance, and several parents had approached the town council about extending the school year and possibly adding a second teacher for the following term. At the ranch, life settled into a pleasant rhythm. Katherine would return from school to find Noah waiting for her, ready to hear about her day and share his own experiences. Evenings were spent in comfortable companionship, reading by the fire or planning improvements to the house and ranch. Noah had begun building an addition to the house, a library with large windows overlooking the mountains, a special gift for his book-loving wife. Mrs. Holloway remained with them, declaring that she had no intention of leaving just because you two decided to get married. Her presence was a blessing, her practical wisdom and warm affection enriching their household. She taught Katherine the art of ranch cooking, laughing at her early mishaps and celebrating her successes with equal enthusiasm. On a warm evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and pink, Katherine turned to Noah with a smile. "I have news," she said, taking his hand and placing it gently over her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Noah's eyes widened, then filled with such joy and wonder that Katherine felt tears spring to her own eyes. "A baby," he whispered, pulling her into his arms. "Oh, Katherine, that's wonderful news." As he held her close, murmuring plans and dreams for their child, Katherine reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come west to marry a man she knew only through letters, only to find herself alone and uncertain in a strange place. But in that moment of deepest vulnerability, another man had appeared, offering help without expectation, showing kindness to a stranger in need. "No one showed at the depot for the bride," she murmured, remembering. The cowboy carried her trunk and said not alone. Noah looked down at her, puzzled. "What's that?" Katherine smiled, reaching up to touch his beloved face. "Just thinking about how our story began, how different everything might have been if you hadn't been there that day." He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I've thanked God every day since for bringing you into my life," he said softly. "And I'll spend the rest of my days making sure you never feel alone again." "I know," Katherine said, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "That's why I love you." The years passed, bringing changes and challenges, joys and sorrows as years do. Katherine and Noah welcomed their first child, a son they named David, the following winter. 2 years later, they were blessed with twin daughters, Emma and Elizabeth. Each child brought new dimensions of love and laughter to their growing family. Katherine eventually stopped teaching formally, though she never stopped being an educator. She taught her own children, of course, but also opened their home to others who sought knowledge. The library Noah built for her became a gathering place for neighbors' children who wanted to borrow books or receive help with difficult subjects. Several of her former students, now grown, would bring their own children to visit Teacher Katherine, as she was still affectionately known in Clearwater. Noah's ranch prospered under his careful management, growing into one of the most successful operations in the territory. He was respected in the community not just for his business acumen, but for his fairness and integrity. When Colorado achieved statehood in 1876, Noah was among those considered for political office, though he declined, preferring to focus on his family and ranch. Mrs. Holloway remained with them until her peaceful passing at the age of 82, surrounded by those who loved her. She lived to see all the Forrester children reach their teens, and often declared that watching them grow was her greatest joy in life. As their family grew and the years accumulated, Katherine and Noah's love deepened, weathering the inevitable storms of life with grace and strength. They never forgot how they had found each other, a chance meeting at a train depot that proved to be anything but chance. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Noah presented Katherine with a special gift, a small, intricately carved wooden chest. Inside was every letter she had ever written to him during their courtship, along with pressed flowers from significant occasions. A columbine like the one in her locket, a sprig from their first Christmas tree, a rose from their wedding. "I've kept every word you've ever written to me," he told her, his blue eyes still able to make her heart skip after all these years. "They're my most treasured possessions." Katherine, deeply moved, showed him her own collection, the notes and small gifts he had given her over the years, preserved with equal care. "We've built quite a history together," she said softly. Noah took her hands in his touch as gentle as it had been on that first day at the depot. "And we're not done yet," he promised. Not by a long shot. He was right. They would go on to see their children marry and begin families of their own. They would welcome grandchildren with the same joy they had felt at the birth of their own babies. They would watch Clearwater grow from a small frontier town into a thriving community, proud to have played a role in its development. Through it all, they remained each other's constant, the unexpected love that had begun with a simple act of kindness on a lonely train platform. A love born when a young woman stood alone, uncertain and afraid, and a good man stepped forward and said the words that changed everything. "You're not alone," and she never was again.